Die in hot fire, and worms shall feed upon your ashes.
Quick spoiler warning before we get comfortable. This video talks openly about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1 and some long-term Game of Thrones history. Nothing wildly spoilery for future seasons, but enough context that you'll want to be caught up. And if you're into quiet character studies that slowly rewire how you see this universe, you might want to subscribe.
Hold your tongue or they'll hurt you!
No, they won't. If they do, they'll answer to my father. Let go of him.
This one's less fireworks and more candlelight at midnight. Because Egg is not who he looks like. And more importantly, he's not who he's supposed to be. On the surface, Egg is the simplest kind of character Westeros has to offer. A shaved-headed kid with dirt on his face, sharp opinions, and way too much confidence for someone who owns nothing. He's clever, mouthy, observant, and constantly pushing against the limits of what a squire is allowed to say. He feels like a grounding presence in a franchise that's historically obsessed with bloodlines, prophecies, and the spectacle of power. And that's exactly the trick. Egg works because the story wants you to forget what kind of world this is. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms narrows the scope so drastically that it almost feels rebellious. No dragons blotting out the sun, no councils whispering about succession, just two people walking dusty roads, trying to get by. The show asks you to settle into that rhythm, to trust that this is a smaller story. But Egg is the reminder that Westeros never lets you stay small.
You shall be king, and die in hot fire, and worms shall feed upon your ashes.
Because Egg isn't just a kid. He's Aegon Targaryen, and that fact alone completely reframes everything he says, everything he notices, and everything he pretends not to care about. What makes Egg fascinating isn't the reveal itself. The story doesn't treat it like a shock twist or a mic drop moment. It's almost offhand. The real weight comes from the why. Why would a Targaryen prince, fourth in line, sure, but still royal blood, shave his head, hide his name, and attach himself to a wandering hedge knight with no land, no title, and no future?
You impudent little rat. What's happened to your hair?
I cut it off, brother. I didn't want to look like you.
The answer isn't danger, it's curiosity. Egg doesn't run from power, he runs toward understanding. Growing up in the Targaryen household at that point in history means growing up surrounded by decay that pretends to be tradition. The dragons are gone. The glory days are already mythologized. What's left is ceremony without meaning and authority without accountability. Egg sees that early. He hears how his brothers talk. He watches how knights behave when they think no one important is watching. And he opts out. Becoming Egg is not about hiding. It's about seeing. As a prince, everyone would perform for him. As a squire, people forget he matters. They complain in front of him. They joke. They're cruel. They're honest. Egg gets access to the truth of the world in a way no Targaryen prince ever should. That's the quiet radicalism at the heart of his character. Dunk is the perfect companion for that journey, because Dunk doesn't belong anywhere either. He's not noble enough to be respected, not low enough to be ignored. He's stuck in the middle, which means he sees how fragile the rules really are. Egg learns more about kingship from watching Dunk stumble through moral choices than he ever could from a throne room lecture. And that's the point. Egg is learning how the world works from the bottom up. When his identity does come out, it's not because he planned some grand reveal. It's because the lie can't survive contact with cruelty. Aerion's presence forces the issue. Aerion, who embodies everything rotten about Targaryen entitlement. Aerion, who mistakes fear for loyalty and power for destiny. Standing between Dunk and Aerion, Egg doesn't reveal himself to claim authority. He does it to stop harm. That moment tells you exactly what kind of king he'll become. Egg's story is often described as lighthearted, and compared to the apocalyptic doom of Game of Thrones, it is. But that softness is deceptive. This is a story about a boy slowly realizing that the world cannot be fixed by good intentions alone, and choosing to try anyway. That's why his future matters so much. Egg doesn't stay a squire forever. He doesn't get to remain anonymous, traveling from village to village, learning at his own pace. History drags him back. Brothers die. Madness takes its toll. The line of succession collapses in on itself, and suddenly the kid who never wanted the throne is the only one left who should have it.
You shall be king.
Aegon V, the Unlikely. That title sounds charming until you think about what it really means. It means the system failed so thoroughly that the best option was the one it never prepared for. Egg becomes king not because he was trained for it, but because he understands what power does to people who don't have it. His reign reflects that. He sides with the small folk. He pushes reforms that make lords uncomfortable. He tries to bend a feudal system toward mercy, knowing full well that mercy is not what it was built for. And for a while, it almost works. But here's where the story darkens. Egg learns the same lesson every reformer in Westeros eventually learns. Good intentions don't survive without teeth. The nobility resists him, quietly at first, politely, then openly. And Egg starts to believe the lie his ancestors believed, that only dragons can enforce justice. This is where the tragedy of Egg truly lives. Not in his death, but in his compromise. The boy who once shaved his head to escape destiny ends his life trying to resurrect it. Summerhall isn't just a disaster, it's a confession. Egg admits, in Fire, that understanding the world was not enough to change it. That empathy without power collapses under pressure. That even the kindest king can be cornered into believing fear is necessary, and that fire takes everything. His family, Dunk, the future he was trying to build. Which brings us back to Game of Thrones. When Maester Aemon speaks of Egg, it's never with pride, it's with grief, not the loud kind. The quiet, suffocating kind that comes from watching someone you love try to do the right thing and fail anyway. Aemon remembers Egg not as a king, but as a boy. A boy who laughed. A boy who asked questions. A boy who wanted the world to make sense. That's why those references hit harder now. Because A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms isn't just filling in lore, it's retroactively breaking your heart. Every smile Egg flashes at Dunk carries the weight of what's coming. Every clever observation is a reminder that insight doesn't guarantee victory. The show isn't building toward a triumphant destiny. It's building toward an understanding of loss. Egg's story is the missing emotional spine of the entire franchise. He's the bridge between the idealism Westeros keeps crushing and the cynicism it rewards. He proves that the system doesn't just destroy villains and fools. It destroys good people who refuse to stop caring. And that's the uncomfortable realization at the center of all this. Game of Thrones often asked whether power corrupts. Egg answers a different question. What does power do to someone who knows better? It exhausts them. It corners them. It teaches them that knowing the truth doesn't mean you can act on it safely. Egg doesn't become cruel. He becomes desperate. And desperation is how even the best intentions catch fire. So when you watch Egg now, quietly correcting Dunk, noticing injustices others shrug off, insisting that things don't have to be this way, you're not watching a future king being forged. You're watching a warning take shape, a reminder that the people most worthy of power are often the ones it will hurt the most. And maybe that's the real reason this story works so well right now. After all the dragons and wars and prophecies, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms asks us to sit with a smaller, sadder truth. That understanding the world doesn't mean you can save it. Sometimes it just means you see the fire coming long before anyone else does. Egg knew what was wrong with Westeros, and it still burned him alive.